Well, hello, and welcome to episode 125 of Drink the Movies. I'm Brian here, as always, with Michaela. And Michaela, today we are going back in time to 1991 to cover one of the classics, a classic tale of friendship, of love, of fried green tomatoes, and talk about fried green tomatoes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This film has been on our list. Well, it's been on my list of things to do in my dream of dreams when we were dreaming up Drink the Movies about 3 years ago. So I'm really excited that we're going to be able to cover it today. It's got really cool characters. It's done really. I mean, it's done really well. I'm really excited to talk about this with you. And I'm excited about the drink that we're drinking because that's also amazing. No fried green tomato garnish, but you know, we had to draw the line somewhere
We we
with the
had
symbolism.
we had to draw the line somewhere. That's right. Yeah, we have a really great cocktail, and this is a really great film. It has stood the test of time. It is beloved by generations now. So yeah, let's get that cocktail made up, Michaela. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to smash up some blackberries and get this cocktail going.
So this recipe hails from twocrumbsup.com, which is like the coolest name ever.
Hmm.
It's a fun website. Go check it out. And it is called a Blackberry Moonshine Smash, which sounds really decadent. Like if you didn't know what moonshine was, right? Now,
I mean, the moonshine sounds less decadent, but yeah, blackberries are definitely decadent, especially when your bestie is crushing them into your face while you're supposed to be working, getting things ready at the restaurant. Come on, get out of here.
that's right. Yeah, and the reason why we picked this is definitely because of that scene. That's a really important scene. We're going to talk about it in the movie part of this podcast. But yeah, you're going to want like 10-ish blackberries to make this drink, and you want them to be like absolutely beautiful and perfect because that's the way they're filmed in the film itself. It's really, really cool. It's something that I definitely remember from watching this the very first time I ever saw it. So let's get into how to make this amazing cocktail because it's pretty tasty.
That's right. Yeah, it's a pretty simple one to put together. You're just going to mix this up, and basically this turns into like a blackberry lemonade kind of thing, and it's real good, just like this week's film. So take 10-ish or so of those blackberries. Your mileage may vary. Make sure they're ripe and looking good. Throw those into a shaker tin. You're going to go ahead and muddle those up. Just give them a nice squish. You can use your hands like they do in the movie. Don't smash it on anyone's face. Just take your muddler. Give those a little bit of a break up there. And then to that, you're going to add 2 ounces of the recipe called for 2 ounces of Old Smoky's Blue Flame moonshine. I couldn't find that particular one. I don't know if it's seasonal or if it's discontinued. I don't know for sure. We used a blueberry moonshine that we found here locally. So add 2 ounces of that, 2 tablespoons of sugar, two the juice from 2 lemons, and 1 cup of water into your shaker tin. Add some ice, shake it, and then you're going to strain it into 2 mason jars filled with ice. This makes 2 drinks, Michaela, which is perfect because you should always be making moonshine smashes with your friends, probably.
Yeah, no, definitely. This was a really lovely treat. I thought moonshine was like the way we used to think, or a way I used to think about bathtub gin.
We thought you
Like
were
I
going to go
thought,
blind when we made this
right,
together.
right. Well, I did a little. But the Old Smoky Distillery, it's in Tennessee. They make the most delectable moonshines now. They have like coffee and they have like an apple pie and they have all of these really fun flavors. So moonshine is not the moonshine of old, which probably tasted like bark or something. I don't know, but this was really, really lovely. I really enjoyed the like freshness of. I love the berries. I just thought that was really lovely, and it's got enough of the acidity and the lemon to kind of um, pucker your lips, but not so
Mhm.
much. I mean, it's not. We did we did an Aperol kind of, well, we did a sour drink for our lobby bar this week, and this was less sour than that
Mhm.
because you have the extra sugar inside it. But I don't know. I thought this was really lovely, and it definitely reminded me of the South. I don't really, um, I don't, I mean, it's Tennessee, so it's not Alabama, but you know.
Yeah, same.
Okay, right?
Listeners in
I mean,
Alabama or Tennessee, I don't know for sure, but if you break this recipe down, basically you're making a lemonade, right? With the 2 tablespoons of sugar, the juice from 2 lemons, and the water, and then you're adding the blackberries and that moonshine. So you could totally make the same cocktail using any sort of mixture of berries and moonshine. So you'd mentioned apple pie. You could do this, make like an apple pie lemonade. You could do like a strawberry lemonade. Literally like the world is your oyster here in terms of this cocktail. So it's really good. It's really light. It is going to be perfect. It has to be perfect in Alabama when the weather, turns hot and it's 150 degrees down there all summer long. This would be perfect to sit out on the front porch and to sip and have a good time chatting with your best friend. So I don't know, Michaela, this was a really good one. I think we're going to have to revisit it a time or two, sitting poolside this summer sometime, but we don't have time for that right now. What we have time to do is talk about fried green tomatoes, and that is exactly what we're going to do. So go grab some mason jars. We're going to mix up another one of these blackberry moonshine smashes, and we'll be right back to chat about 1991's fried green tomatoes.
spoiler warning for fried green tomatoes. If you've not yet seen fried green tomatoes, you should press pause. You should go make yourself an amazing blackberry moonshine smash, and then you should come back after you see it, because we're going to chat about all the things. And there's a lot of things. You've been warned.
There are a lot of things, absolutely, as this story unfolds against two kind of timelines. So, if you've not seen Fried Green Tomatoes, you have had ample time. It's 32 years old now, released in 1991. It was directed by John Avnet, and it stars Kathy Bates as Evelyn and Jessica Tandy as her new friend Ninny, who is weaving the tale of these two young women growing up in rural Alabama. Iggy, played by Mary Stuart Masterson, and Ruth, played by Mary Louise Parker. And Michaela, not only is fried green tomatoes delicious Southern treat, if you've never had fried green tomatoes, go find some. They're delicious. This was also a book. It was the movie was based off of this book, Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, who was written by Fannie Flagg, and this garnered 2 Academy Award nominations.
That's right. I love this film, and I didn't even realize how well it had garnered that year. We got a supporting actress nomination for Jessica Tandy, and then best adapted screenplay because Fannie Flagg wrote the original book, and I think she wrote one version of the script. I think there were multiple people who ended up having a hand in that. So, but really good. I really understand why. This is a great example of a wonderful screenplay, because to be able to tell the story and to weave a story in such a way that has both, as you've said, these 2 timelines, these 2 different groups of friends, and the different challenges that each group of friends is dealing with, and how they support each other and listen to each other and take care of each other in these very different times. And also the similarities, to be able to really put that into a screenplay was really cool. So I was really glad to see that it did get nominated for that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Fannie Flagg, as you mentioned, had written the book, and I think Passer to him probably was there to assist with the writing of the screenplay, who was done by Carol Sobieski, who actually, unfortunately, passed away before those Oscars. So it was a still great to be able to get that nomination of course there before her untimely passing. So let's get into this movie a little bit. Michaela, you mentioned the 2 timelines, and you kind of get started here with a very kind of important image of our timeline in the past, right? Set in Alabama, kind of between the world wars, I think. So kind of in the 30s and 40s primarily, but we see this car being raised up out of this river. It's kind of this dammed section, this old rust bucket of I don't even know what kind of car it was, but it looks incredible as it's pulled up. It looks like it's been at the bottom of this river for like years and years and years, which is exactly what we're going to find out about it. But then we cut to Kathy Bates' character. She is playing a woman by the name of Evelyn Couch. She is in the car with her husband, and she is on her way to the nursing home.
That's right. She's going to Rose Hills Home of Convalescence, I think is what the name of the sign says outside, which I think is really strange now. But her husband has gotten lost. She is on the side of the road. and you see basically a ghost town, right? But it's not like a Western ghost town where you've got swinging doors and saloons. There's a cafe with like a green roof and a couple of different kind of houses there. It looks like there's an old like general store across the street, and there's a train station, and this really beautiful shot. It's one of my favorite like art direction films, because they really made this ghost town area look so great. It looks totally overgrown. It looks totally run down. And to see it in its old, like when it looks old, and then to see it, flash back, it's very almost like Titanic-esque, where you're seeing this ruined thing, and then you have this flashback of when it was in its prime, and it's just really startling and amazing. Really love that. So Evelyn's in the car, her husband's calling on the phone at a payphone, because I guess there's a payphone there. But this was 1991, so it was way before things like cell phones and GPSs. And she hears this sound of a train, and she doesn't see a train, and it's kind of weird, because you don't know if this is really going to be like a supernatural thing. But you hear this train, and then she's like, "Do you hear a train?" And her husband's like, "I don't hear a train." And you're like, "I don't know what's happening." But then they end up getting into this convalescent home, and then we pick up later why this was so important. But it's very interesting that she has a negative sense of direction, and yet she found herself in that spot. And she heard this train go by when she didn't see a train, and like the air rustles around, and just the way in which they shoot that scene is really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really beautiful. It's kind of like the sixth sense of ghost towns, I guess. Maybe here's we're going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, we meet Evelyn. She is on her way there. You speak really highly of kind of the way this town looks, and it's really great because it's all overgrown and things like that, and it's very much kind of like a snapshot of time, because you still get the sense that this was a very lively, bustling place that has just been, lost to the sands of time, as it were. So Evelyn and her husband Ed make their way to the nursing home, and Evelyn is there. She's having a candy bar. Who doesn't love a candy bar? Sitting there. When Ninny walks in, played by Jessica Tandy, she comes in and sits down, and they start having a wee bit of a chat. Ninny is one for telling stories, and she has quite the tale to tell Evelyn, as she's going to go back and recount the escapades of Iggy and Ruth. Iggy played by Mary Stuart Masterson, Ruth played by Mary Louise Parker, and we pick up with Iggy here, back way back when these two were kids, right? Having a tough time at a wedding with their brother, but unfortunately, trouble is going to strike both Iggy and Ruth that fateful night.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because I loved Mary Stuart Masterson. She did a lot of really great stuff around this time, late 80s, early 90s. This is my favorite performance from Mary Louise Parker. She is kind of herself. They actually have a young version of Iggy, a young actress play her as a child, because Ruth was about 7 or 8 years older than her. And so, and Ruth was in love with Iggy's big brother, Buddy, who's played by the amazing and young Chris O'Donnell.
Very young, very young.
Very young. He's like, I don't know, he's like 15. I don't know, but he's amazing. And
he wasn't even Robin yet.
He wasn't even Robin yet. That's right. He wasn't D'Artagnan. I mean, he wasn't anybody. But this is a town that has a train that comes through it, and there are train tracks, and there's a reason why they tell you don't play on the train tracks. Buddy, unfortunately, gets his foot stuck in like the iron part of the track, one of the irons, and he tries to pull his foot out while a train is bearing down on him, and unfortunately he's unsuccessful, and he is killed right in front of Iggy and Ruth. And Ruth was sort of promised. I don't know if they weren't really engaged, but they were quite young, because they were quite young, but they were really probably going to be together. And so Ruth is devastated, and Iggy is completely just crushed. She's kind of I love her character. She's kind of a tomboy. It's the day of this wedding, and she doesn't want to wear this dress, and her brother's kind of the only one who can reason with her and talk to her, and he believes in her in a way that is really kind of amazing, but also very sad, because her own mother Itchy's own mother just doesn't really know what to do with her. Like, she doesn't want to do any of the girl things. She doesn't want to look nice. She wants to be with the boys, and she wants to run out in the fields. And it's very hard.
Yeah, it's definitely very hard on Iggy there, and we kind of follow along with her story, right? As she's having trouble kind of processing this loss of her brother, who is by all accounts her best friend and potentially only friend and ally and confidant here in the world in Birmingham, Alabama area. So we see Iggy grow up a little bit. The family is kind of stepping in, trying to help. I don't know, help her move on, help her not run with some of the bad crowds, and that's where Ruth is going to kind of come back into the story, right? She's going to go meet up with Iggy. Iggy, like I said, is running with the wrong crew. She's out playing poker, drinking, doing all sorts of shenanigans that you shouldn't be doing. And Ruth is going to get her out of there and kind of get her away from that life. And I don't know, give her a shoulder to cry on, an ear to talk to listen in on, and you're going to start kind of seeing their friendship start to blossom here as Ruth is able to kind of pull Iggy out of that depression from losing her brother.
Yeah. And it's interesting because they're opposites, right? Iggy is definitely, she's going to do the bad thing first. And Ruth is just very civilized, and she goes to church. She helps with all the events. She is like every mother's dream child. She's going to do everything she's supposed to. And she comes to spend the summer about, I don't know, Iggy's probably in her late teens. She comes to spend the summer with Iggy's family, and they get really close. But then Ruth confesses that, she's going to go get married. And Iggy's not pleased. She's like, why are you going to go do that? And she says, well, because that's what I'm supposed to do. And I don't think I even know the guy. We see Iggy meet her to-be husband for a hot minute. His name is Frank Bennett. And he is not a nice guy. He already, like, you don't know that really yet, but he's just smarmy and gross. And I love Iggy because she has no false pretenses at all. She is not going to pretend to like you if she doesn't.
Yeah.
And she's like really disappointed that Ruth is going to go and live this life and do the things that she's supposed to do, and move away, because obviously back in these parts in these days, women didn't have a lot of choices. And when you got married, the expectation was that you were going to go and live in your husband's house, and he was going to take care of you, and you were going to just, maybe you saw your family again, and maybe you didn't. I mean, it really just kind of depended.
That's right. Honor and obey. But luckily, for Ruth, Iggy is there. And, like you said, Iggy's not going to mince words. She says, straight up, dude, get out of here. I'm going to end you if you don't knock this off. But she doesn't get the feeling that he's going to knock it off. So Iggy makes a plan to get Ruth out of there and back to Alabama, to Whistle Stop, which is now growing into kind of this post-war area. It's got the train running right through there. So it's like this little train town. So the little city is developing. And what are two best friends to do now that you've moved back to Whistle Stop but open your very own cafe? The Whistle Stop Cafe is the place to be.
That's right. And they serve fried green tomatoes and barbecue. And I have to tell you, so I've seen this film, right? I watched it a lot as a kid. I hadn't seen it in a really long time. So when I watched this, just for the sake of this podcast, I really tried to look at it in a very artsy way. And I have to tell you, I love the scene when they're opening up the shop, where they've got the people painting on, and it's the same. They're painting on the windows, and they're painting what their specials are, because they're special every day, and all the pies that they have. And it's so brilliantly contrasting against what we see at the beginning of the film, which is when it's all run down, but you can still see like pieces of paint. And so I don't know how they did this. It's probably not even the same set, and they had to make two sets. I believe it if that's the case, because it's so amazing how everything looks so fresh and new. And there's this great scene where they get into this food fight, and they're, because Iggy can't cook at all. I guess she's a server. She's like serving people and helping out with the barbecue in the back. But Ruth is really the one who like makes the pies and makes everything pretty. And so when Iggy's trying to make her fried green tomatoes and they're horrible, they get into this big fight where they're throwing flour and these amazing looking ripe raspberries at each other. And it's fabulous. I just so love that part of show. It's so great.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really great part because it kind of because up until now, kind of their friendship has gone, pretty quickly as we're getting these flashbacks, between Evelyn and Ninny, telling the story about these two women. So really, once we get to kind of this Whistle Stop Cafe, it's really when we're going to start to learn a little bit more about their relationship, seeing them spend time together. And luckily for these two, there's also Sipsy, who is the family cook. She's going to come in and help do a lot of the cooking. She probably is the one that had the fried green tomato recipes, and then her son, Big George, played by Stan Shaw, is there. He's the one that is going to be doing the barbecue cooking out back. So I have to say, if you watch Fried Green Tomatoes on an empty stomach, don't do that because you're going to be hungry. You're going to want to go get something delicious. Maybe not at the end of the movie. Maybe that's going to
I mean,
but we're getting ahead. We're getting ahead a little bit here. So we've got these two women, right? Iggy and Ruth. Ruth, as it turns out, was pregnant. Ends up having a kid, and unfortunately, when you have a terrible husband like Ruth did, he's going to drive himself from Georgia to Alabama to come and try to take that baby back. But fortunately for us, I guess, I don't know, unfortunately for him, he's going to run into a wee bit of a situation. They're trying to get the kid out of there. And this is the great mystery of the movie, Michaela. Actually, there's two great mysteries, but this is the great mystery of Iggy and Ruth, is what really happened to Ruth's husband, because we don't see what happens. We know kind of what happened because his car gets drudged up out of the river. So we can assume that he met an untimely end, but we don't know who did it, how they did
that's
it,
right.
why they did it, who did it. Michaela.
Yeah, we will. We find out. We find out through the course of it. But that's how the original relationship between Ninny, if you'll remember, the very old lady played by Jessica Tandy, and Evelyn kind of she hooks her with this idea of murder and intrigue. And Evelyn, it's interesting because we talk about being polite versus being authentic, right? Because she's too polite to feign to explain that she's not really interested in hearing Ninny go on at the very beginning of their conversation. Because Ninny, when they first meet, Ninny's talking about like her gallbladder or some surgery she's had, and of course Evelyn's like, "Oh, that's lovely," but then she buries the lead and talks about this murder, and that's what makes Evelyn's eyes go wide, and she's like, tell me everything. And she's like, well, it all started 15 years before that. And so you have this really long like story arc, and so you see that every time Evelyn goes back to visit, she gets a little bit more of the story. And so we find a little bit more about Ruth and Iggy and this horrible guy Frank Bennett and what he did. And the thing about Iggy that becomes quite dangerous is because she threatened to kill Frank Bennett. When he was beating his wife, and she was trying to get her out of their house and safely back in to Whistle Stop. And someone saw that, and then he goes missing. So that doesn't look good. But Iggy is a person that's ahead of her time. This was a really tough time. It was in the 1920s in the South. And there was, still a lot of horrible racism and racial tensions in that space. The KKK is totally in this movie. I think it stood the test of time because it ages pretty well. But Iggy gets a lot of flack in the neighborhood and in the town because she refuses to stop being friends with Big George, Stan Shaw, played by Stan Shaw. She refuses to not serve people of color. They can't be inside the cafe, but she makes sure that they all get fed. And she's doing these things like, getting on a train in the middle of the night and throwing out canned goods to these tent towns that the train go by, right? Because she doesn't want people to starve. And it's interesting because Ruth is like everything you should be, or you want to be. She's thought of as like the really good influence on Iggy, but really that Iggy is inspiring to Ruth because she would not necessarily be that brave to stand up for what she believes in that way,
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned kind of Evelyn and her conversations with Ninny. Let's step back and talk about that a little bit here, Michaela. As you mentioned, Ruth, by all accounts, is she's the the girl you're supposed to aspire to be, right? But she's learning a lot from Iggy because, Iggy is the one always standing up for people, doing the right things all the time. And that's kind of the same as Evelyn, right? Evelyn is very much a Ruth in this. So I think that she's taking a lot of inspiration from Iggy's story as well. So we see Evelyn's kind of progression throughout this film, right? Where she's very very lacking in self-confidence. Her husband Ed is played by Gaylord Sartain. Couldn't give her the time of day. Sits around, watches sports. Doesn't care about her. Doesn't pay her any attention. Care about her wants or needs or hopes or dreams or anything like that. And Evelyn's kind of a pushover, but she's getting empowered through listening to these stories from Ninny. Right? She is hearing the trials and tribulations of Iggy Threadgood and Ruth Jameson, and she's saying she has this really great line where she says, "I looked in the mirror and I didn't like who I saw, so I decided to change." And you see Evelyn's change. She gets very much more stand up for herself. She doesn't take any flack from anyone, and she's on her way to kind of her own self discovery, which is really kind of great. Which I think is the big reason why this story resonated so well. And telling the story of female empowerment for sure. So you're getting that kind of story, set against the backdrop of this, the story that's taking place, in the distant past there.
Yeah, completely agree. I really liked watching this as an adult. Was very different for me than watching it as a younger person. I mean, this came out when I was 10, and I love these kind of films, so I watched this a lot in my formative years. And I always thought Iggy was like a great role model because of who she was. But I also really liked, as an adult, watching Ninny and Evelyn's relationship, as you say, right? Because Ninny tells these beautifully woven stories. She's got a way with words, and she listens. And there's one period of time where Evelyn has a really tough time. Somebody says something mean to her, and she gets mad, and she doesn't know what to do with her anger. And she doesn't have anybody to talk to. She's in a really tough spot, and she doesn't harp on it because it's not polite to complain that your husband is a jerk or just a hapless person. She's doing all of these things. She's going into these marriage classes, which are hilarious. I mean, they're really funny. They're great. I love those little vignettes of her trying to do everything she possibly can to turn his head and get him to not watch sports, instead of sit at the table and talk to her over the dinner that she has made him, because that's what the expectation is.
that he complains about. Yeah, she's going to these classes. She's doing I don't know, jazzercise or something. She's jumping on this trampoline, and it's Kathy Bates, so it's amazing because Kathy
Right.
Bates is great, and the different costuming, her outfits through the movie are pretty great too. I will say I thought that was really great because it definitely feels exactly like what a very fancy 1991 would be. So I loved kind of going back and seeing that was like a snapshot in time too, for sure. But yeah, so she's gaining a little bit of self-confidence there through kind of this friendship, and hearing these stories, and finding out what it's like to take some agency over your life, hearing these stories about these two women. But everything's not great for Iggy and Ruth. Let's get back to their story here for a minute. As we talked about, Ruth's husband met his untimely demise, and they need someone to pin it on. So who are you going to do that? Well, if you're in Alabama or basically anywhere, you're going to pin that on Big George. And unfortunately, for the people that are pressing the charges, Iggy is not going to stand for that. She says, absolutely not. You can arrest me for it, lock me up, throw away the key. I don't care. I'm not going to back down, and we are going to trial. And the trial is excellent because I really love it. I love Iggy kind of through this section, as she is very, very combative with the district attorney or whoever he is, because he's the worst. He's a jerk. The judge is a jerk. But luckily, we've got a reverend on our side who's going to come in and do the right thing. Richard Ryle plays Reverend Scroggins, and Richard Ryle is amazing. He's in all sorts of things, and he's always so jovial. Love him.
Yeah, no, he's a great character actor, and this whole trial is great because he goes up and he's going to swear on the Bible, and he's like, I brought my own if you don't mind. And then he testifies that both Big George and Iggy were at this 3-day revival. I guess it was literally 72 hours of praying. That's a lot of praying.
A lot.
And so he couldn't, neither one of them could possibly have hurt Frank Bennett. And so the judge is like, wait a minute, you've got a pastor who is, he's a white pastor. So he's like the most trustworthy human on this planet. Their credibility is great. And he's just given an alibi to both our people. Like, you have no case, and I'm done. I'm so done. And so what I found was so great is that everybody keeps saying that Ruth is such a good influence on Iggy, but Ruth is the one who went to the pastor and was like, look, will you please lie and tell and will you please tell the court this and swear on you on a Bible that's not even a Bible, it's like a copy of the Moby Dick or something, and but Iggy will start going to church, I promise. And so at the end of this, Iggy's like, are you kidding me? I will never forgive you. I don't know what would have been worse, jail or church.
I would rather go to jail. Yeah, she says, Ruth tells her that the reverend says that, her penance can be going to church every week. So that's pretty great. That's how the trial goes. But then unfortunately, kind of shortly after the trial, Ruth is going to fall ill. She's going to be gravely sick with cancer, and you're kind of seeing then kind of the end of her of their relationship. But as Ruth is unfortunately going to be passing away from this cancer that's going to take her life, and it's really kind of very, very sad and heartfelt and intimate. And Iggy's there kind of bedside with her, retelling the same kind of joke that's happened where these ducks fly away with this frozen pond over to Georgia. And every time that joke gets told, it's even more kind of endearing. And hearing it the first time from her brother, and then as this joke kind of carries through the story. And that's kind of where our story is going to end, with Iggy and Ruth. Really, unfortunately, their time together on this earth has come to an end.
Yeah, I really it's such a hard scene because Iggy has really become so much more than a friend. I mean, they're obviously friends, but they live together. In the book, they actually are in a romantic relationship. It's not explicit in the movie, and that was a choice that they made, although this was heralded as a really I guess inclusive story for being told in 1991. And I thought that the scene where Ruth is dying is just about the saddest and most beautiful scenes, because she asks Iggy to tell her this story, and you think that the shot is going to move, but it doesn't. And the way in which it's just framed, you see a clock and you see these this window and the light coming in, and Iggy's telling the story at the window, and then she comes back to the bed and realizes that Ruth is gone. And it's really hard, but it's so beautiful. And you don't really know what's going to happen with Iggy. I mean, one of the things Ruth keeps saying to Iggy along the way is, hey, when are you going to settle down? When are you going to, I love that we're together and I love that we're friends, but at some point you got to find a feller. Are you ever going to do the things that everyone expects you to do? And she's like, absolutely not. I'm as settled as I hope to be. And you don't know much about what happens after that, because of course Ninny's telling this story to Evelyn, and Evelyn is just so sad and scared. I really resonated with Evelyn because she's like, she said, what did she say? I hate death. It scares me so. And of course, Ninny is like, death ain't nothing. Like, don't be scared of that. That's silly. Like,
that's right. Yeah, she says driving in rush hour traffic is scarier than dying,
right.
because everyone's going to do it. And yeah, I love that sentiment too. But you brought it up, Michaela. We don't know what happens to Iggy then. That's kind of where their story ends. We go back to kind of our current timeline there as Evelyn and Ninny are chatting. Evelyn decides that she would like Ninny to come in and live with them. There's a really great scene where Kathy Bates is taking a sledgehammer to the wall to tear down a wall, and then she's patching the wall back up because she decided to close that bedroom back in because she wants Ninny to come live with her. She says Ed to go pound sand if he has any problems with it because Evelyn now is the queen of her own domain, and it's awesome. So she goes back to the nursing home to look for Ninny. They tell her that Ninny died, which is not true because Miss kept records. I don't know why, but Ninny is there. She is out on the town. She went back to her house, but unfortunately, just like we saw at the beginning of the movie, that town is done for because the railroad stopped going through there. The town died, and Ninny's home was condemned and taken down. But we're going to get one last story from Ninny, and that's going to be kind of the conclusion as to what happened to Ruth's husband.
Yeah, Ruth's husband, Frank Bennett. Well, should we tell them? We did say spoilers, so everybody, we said it. So Ruth Bennett comes in with all of his KKK people as they did that for a distraction because they took Big George out to this clearing and they're whipping him. They've got a bunch of burning crosses, and so the town is really concerned about what's going on over there. But Frank is going to use that as a way to go and kidnap his child and bring back Ruth to Georgia, where he lived. Yeah. And so what I love is Sipsy, played by the amazing Cicely Tyson. She's like, I'm not scared of you, but she's like 4 feet tall compared to this guy. And so he just, hits her in the head, grabs the baby and tries to put the baby in the car. There is a man by the name of Old Smokey, played by Tim Scott. He's this kind of old rundown alcoholic that they feed. They make sure that they feed at the cafe. And he happened to be sleeping out in the shed, and he heard what was going on. And of course he tries to come to the rescue. But he's kind of an old drunk. So Frank Bennett punches him out. But he buys Sipsy some time to grab a shovel and beat it over his head. And I got to say, it wasn't enough. I mean, there's a moment, if you've watched The Last of Us, there's a moment where there's a lot of axes in a person's face. And I kind of wanted a moment kind of like that, where we just got multiple hittings of a shovel because this guy is so awful. But it's only one shovel. And
I think it's a frying pan.
Oh, it's a frying pan. It is. You're right.
That's right.
It was big and black. It was like this. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Sipsy is using that frying pan to make fried green tomatoes and to take Ruth's husband out. A for effort. Good job, Sipsy. So what do? They find Iggy. They kind of tell her what happened. Big George is back, luckily, safe and sound back there, and they're formulating a plan. What do you do with Ruth's dead husband? It's time to make some barbecue. Big George, get to it. I'll let you let your own mind wander from there. But it turns out that is the best barbecue that our detective guy, Sheriff Smoot, has ever had. So yeah, there you go. Back to our real world here. We've got Ninny and Evelyn. They're outside of Ninny's forsaken home. Evelyn says, come live with me. That'll be great. We can keep being friends. You can keep telling me stories. I can keep learning from you and all these tales that weave. And on their way out of town, they pass by the cemetery and they see the headstone for Ruth, which has a little jar of honey that Iggy left, because Ninny says, sometimes she sees Iggy, and that's where it ends.
That's where it ends. Yeah, I love that. There's a scene at the beginning of this friendship between Iggy and Ruth where Iggy says, hey, you're gonna come hang with me this summer. You're gonna do the things that I'm gonna want to do. Do you like honey? And she goes to this old kind of hollowed out tree that is full of bees, and she goes and grabs like a giant chuck of honeycomb and puts it in a mason jar. And this scene is terrifying if you're afraid of bees or if you're allergic to bees. because there are hundreds of them and they are all over Mary Stuart Masterson. They're all over her. And I thought for sure that this was some sort of stunt double. Apparently there was a stunt double and the stunt double quit like the day of shooting. They were like, no, I'm not doing that. I could die or something. I don't know. I don't know what happened. But Mary Stuart Masterson was like, all right, anybody got pointers? I guess I'll just be real slow and careful. I don't know if she got bit. I'm hoping she wasn't allergic. But it's an amazing
Yeah.
scene. And so Ruth always called Iggy the bee charmer. And so it's just a really beautiful kind of coming full circle vehicle that you see a lot in movies, but it's so well done here. It doesn't feel over the top at all because the note just says, I'll always love you, the bee charmer. And of course, then Ninny or Evelyn is like, Iggy's alive. Oh my gosh. And you get the feeling when you look at Jessica Tandy and they hold that shot just a little too long that maybe Ninny is Iggy. You get this idea. Now, in the book, that is not the case. They are very different people. But I have a theory on this, and but I want to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so it is very ambiguous. And actually the book kind of, makes, well, from what I read anyways, is that the book kind of makes it seem on one hand very clear that they are not the same person, but on the other hand it makes it very very convoluted that they could be the same person. But the movie is very ambiguous as to whether or not you think they are the same person. I think that kind of through telling of these stories, I want to say that they're probably the same person. I think they were meant to be the same person, because certainly, kind of growing up and telling that story, the wedding and things, but everything else seems like it would have been very secondhand knowledge. And especially when you see something like how they're, discussing what to do with Ruth's dead husband. That seems like something that probably only Iggy, Sipsy, and Big George would know. So.
Right. Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. The only thing I started thinking about this a lot right after seeing this for the podcast, and I thought, even if they weren't the same person, I think she had to separate herself because Iggy became a legend in that town, and she was, when everything kind of shut down, and that's one of the last things that Ninny narrates at the end of the film is, when the cafe closed. Because Iggy couldn't do it herself because she couldn't cook. When the cafe closed, the entire heart of the town just kind of died and people scattered to the wind. And it's amazing how one thing could really bring it all together. So Ninny could kind of reinvent and tell this tale and separate herself from it. I don't know who else would have gone looking at this land, right? I don't know who else would have been able to do that and leave that marker of honey, because the town is literally, it looks like a ghost town. I mean, unless somebody made a special trip. So I kind of love the idea of Iggy and Ninny being the same person. I also really like the fact that Ninny does talk about some other aspects of her life. She had a child who was a special needs child when she was 40. And that timeline totally fits that maybe, Iggy found a feller and had a baby and decided to not do what they did with special needs babies back in the day and keep the baby and raise it and love it and all of that. So I don't know. I kind of like the idea of them being the same, which makes it even more beautiful because Ruth was Iggy's best friend, and now Evelyn is Ninny's best friend. And the fact that love that Ruth gave to Iggy can continue to live on as long as people are there to kind of remember these stories, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a really good story of between Iggy and Ruth, of them kind of saving each other and turning into this friendship, this loving relationship that they have between the two of them, and how their relationship propels Evelyn on to a place of love and self-love and acceptance within herself, and kind of the rippling effects of what friendship and relationship like Iggy and Ruth had can really mean. And then kind of set against that, you have the town of Whistle Stop, which is really kind of symbolic, I think, of their friendship as they they rescue each other, and then this town begins to thrive with them kind of in the heart of it. And then once that um once Ruth passes away, and it's not really like a split of a friendship, but it's one half of the friendship then is gone, and the town is unable to remain intact, just like these two characters were as they're separated by death there. So yeah, that is Fried Green Tomatoes. It is a really lovely tale of, like, said it 1,000 times now, of friendship, of love, of all of those things. And this came out in 1991. Michaela, you mentioned watching it a bunch of times growing up. I did not watch it nearly that many times growing up. I saw it about the time that it came out. I think probably rented it or something, borrowed it from the library at some point, and watched it one night. But it wasn't, being a young, let's see, 1991, 10-year-old boy. The tale of Fried Green Tomatoes
Yeah.
certainly was not something that was that interesting to me at the time, but really watching this as an adult and kind of analyzing, the relationships and the way that Kathy Bates' character is able to, take some agency over her own life. And, that's something that we're still talking about in 2023, right? Is, empowering yourself and taking care of yourself, and the mental health aspects of being in good relationships and loving yourself first. Seeing that story played out in 1991 with the lens of time, it's a lot of things we're still dealing with here, but it's very interesting to go back and kind of relive this slice of time.
Yeah. No, it was one of my favorite films growing up, this movie. I mean, I thought Iggy was just the best thing ever. And I, you know, I mean, I love Mary Stuart Masterson. I feel like I have such an admiration for all the films she did. And I wish she could do more stuff, because she was amazing. But I think this film is really special because, and it's often called like a chick flick. I don't
Mhm.
really like that term, because I think that people of all can get something from this if they're open to experience it. And so, I really love the way this story has always made me feel about friends and lovers, because, realizing that they were more than friends, but it wasn't about this romance, this passionate romance, right? They were each other's like rock, in a way that, when people get married, they're like, you're going to be my rock forever. And it was like, yeah,
Mhm.
unless they beat you, and they're not, or they, can't even be asked to eat dinner with you, like, they're not going to be your rock. It's, one of my favorite lines from this film is about the just the power of best friends, and how that's what really gets you through, because a heart can be broken, but it'll still go on beating just the same. And that's when really good friends come in, to help you through. And I just loved it. And I
Mhm.
hadn't seen it. Gosh, I hadn't seen this film in probably maybe 15 years. It had been a really long time. And I think that it does a really good job of portraying those times in a way that are factual and history based.
Mhm.
And I really liked that, it still tugged at the heartstrings, and it did something to me. There was something different to me as a 40 some odd person, than it did when I was, 10 or 15 or 18 watching it as a younger, adult. So
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely hits different as you kind of have the life experience, right? As a as a young person watching this, obviously you're identifying with kind of the playfulness of Iggy, and then as you're kind of at our age now, you're identifying more with the character of Evelyn, and then as we get even older, it's going to be sort of identifying with the character of Ninny, looking back at your life. So I think that it's kind of amazing on this kind of multi generational level too. And just a real quick hit here on Ninny, Jessica Tandy, nominated for the Academy Award, there was just 2 years off of winning the Academy Award for Best Actress in Driving Miss Daisy. So Jessica Tandy playing two of the most iconic female characters of the 90s right there in pretty quick succession. So that's pretty great stuff. So Michaela, that is Fried Green Tomatoes. Like you said, it had been on our list to do for a while and finally got around to do it. We finally got a really good cocktail to go along with it, and that's Blackberry Moonshine Smash. It's perfect accompaniment to having yourself a plate of fried green tomatoes served hot, just like they were at the Whistle Stop Cafe, which you get a really beautiful shot of there in the dilapidated town. All those signs still look pretty good on the old cafe, I will say. So let us know at home if you're a fan of Fried Green Tomatoes, the movie, of Fried Green Tomatoes, the film. Let us know if you make a Blackberry Moonshine Smash and what you think about these relationships. We want to know all of that stuff. You can send us all of your thoughts and pictures our way on our social medias. That's at Drink the Movies on Instagram and Twitter, and Facebook.com/Drink the Movies. You can find the recipe for the cocktails, episode recaps, all that good stuff on our website, which is www.drinkthemovies.com. And if you want to support the podcast even further, you can do so on our Patreon. It's patreon.com/drinkthemovies. We have a bunch of bonus content and hangouts and stuff going on over there. Our current episode up this month was John Wick 4 recap, so go check that out if you feel so inclined. But you're definitely going to want to make sure that you are liking the podcast, giving us 5-star reviews, sharing it with your friends, doing all those things when we're coming with our regular episodes. We got Little Women next week, so make sure you get subscribed. Michaela, where can they do that?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Good Pods, anywhere, wherever you're listening right now. Just go ahead and click the subscribe button if you're liking what you're hearing. Give us a 5-star review. Tell your friends. This is an amazing job. I never thought that I could ever be in a place where I could talk about movies and cocktails and have anybody listen to me. And it's probably because Brian's doing it with me. But we're
to be fair, you would still be doing it. You'd just be like speaking it out.
I'd be doing it to myself in the shower.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
On the next episode of Getting Clean. Yes. So thank you all for listening. And please, if you're liking what you're hearing, we do 2 drops a week. Subscribe, tell your friends. It really helps us get the Drink the Movie stuff out there.
Absolutely. So, with that in mind, Michaela, this was a heavy film. It brings joy to your heart, but there's some heavier topics we're touching on this week, and next week we got Little Women. So, no let up there. So we're gonna have to go find a really great cocktail for that one, and I'm probably gonna make up like a pitcher of this Blackberry Moonshine Smash, to be honest, because it's still pretty warm out there. So let's do that, and we'll talk to everyone next time on
Drink
the Movies.
I found out what the secret of life is. Friends. Best friends.
I thought you were going to say the secret to life was Tawandaa.
I love it.